This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 123. Araminta Robertson. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 123 of Experts in the Wire. We are back. And we're back with a fantastic episode today. I spoke to Araminta Robertson. She is managing director at Mint Studios, a content marketing agency that focuses on creating content that generates business, not just traffic. Araminta will be speaking at Brighton SEO this fall, and she has also hosted her own podcast. I was just very impressed with her approach to converting blog traffic into customers, so I wanted her to share this entire process with you. She does work in fintech, but what we talk about will apply to any company, B2B or B2C. I think this episode will help a lot of us. Let's jump in to episode 123 of Experts on the Wire. Araminta, welcome to episode 123 of Experts on the Wire. It's fantastic to be back after a little bit of a hiatus. So welcome, and how are you today?
Thanks, Dan. I'm great and super happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So I want to just talk a little bit about your background. I saw that you studied business and finance, and now you're doing content marketing for fintech. So obviously the finance part makes sense, but how did you end up in the world of content?
Sure. I think like many in the content space, you kind of fall into it by accident. I started out working in content or working as a content writer for a financial technology company in Barcelona. I was living there. And I worked for them for a short while and eventually realized that I could do this as a freelancer. It'd be a lot more fun. I could also travel. So after working for them, that's exactly what I did. And that's when I started becoming a freelancer and working with fintech companies from all around the world. I moved to Malaysia at the time, so I was able to work with the local fintech scene over there. And then after a while, I moved back to the UK, and now I still get to work with fintech companies from all around the world. I started out as a freelancer, and now here we are in content marketing as an agency.
That's great. It's always an interesting path that people take when they land in content or SEO. And can you tell us a little bit about what is Mint Studios?
Sure. So Mint Studios is a content marketing agency specifically for finance startups or fintech companies. Our tagline is that we help fintech companies turn their blogs into a customer acquisition channel. And essentially what that means is we've got our own framework that we use to help fintech companies use content to kind of push their mission of financial education and financial literacy, but also actually get results from it. And I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit later, but we've got this framework that we use, and that's kind of what we use for each client. And so far we've worked with over 20 companies from the US, Singapore, Australia, UK, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great job.
That's great. So, and that segues nicely, and I want to talk about your overall strategy to bottom of funnel content. This was very interesting to me, as well as I'm sure a lot of listeners, because I've been helping lots of sites grow lots of traffic, top of funnel traffic, even some mid funnel, even some low funnel traffic. And I've struggled sometimes to get this traffic to convert better and to acquire customers, to convert that to leads or whatever it may be. So I'm very fascinated in this, but I'm curious, like, why the focus on just bottom of funnel content, right? Like, and certainly I guess I'd say, quote unquote, guilty perhaps of focusing a lot on traffic as a metric, as an SEO practitioner, and maybe not focusing as much as I should on bottom of funnel traffic and conversions, right? So what do you think is the benefit of this sort of focus? Like, should we worry about top of funnel traffic? Should we try to grow traffic? And where does that sort of fit into the overall strategy?
Yeah, great question. So basically, I started out as a content writer. So I obviously have been guilty of what you've mentioned as well. And I set up this agency because I was tired of creating content that I knew no one was reading. And I knew that wasn't doing what companies really want, which is customers. So I have an article on the Mint Studios website where I break down why I set up the agency. And essentially, I realized that often for content writing for companies or SEO for companies, for-profit companies that want customers, you can't just do top of the funnel. You need to, at the end of the day, understand the business objectives and create content that aligns with those business objectives. So I took inspiration from Grow and Convert. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're an agency that use this model as well. And I realized that, what companies really want is customers at the end of the day. And I wanted to create content or create an agency that was more aligned with that. And that's kind of why I set up the Mint Studios. And it's why we have this specific framework where we focus on creating content that brings in customers, not just traffic. I'm not saying never do top of the funnel, never do middle of the funnel. I will get into more details later, but it's more like, let's include bottom of the funnel. Let's even maybe prioritize it. And that way our clients can see kind of the benefits of content quite early on, believe in it a bit more, and they also understand it. And also, anyone who's worked in a company knows, like, higher ups, they care about profits, revenue, expenses, talks about backlinks and traffic. At the end, they don't really care. So by being a lot more aligned with them, they respect a lot more content marketing. They understand the value. It's just things are a lot easier. And it's a lot more rewarding. Like, we have obviously writers and strategists on our team. And when we tell writers, your article is generating, 3 or 5 customers, they get really excited and they want to continue writing. So there's just overall so many different, it's a win-win-win scenario for everyone.
Do you think that your background in education and business has influenced this? Because my background's in music, so I'm like a performer, right? So I'm always excited about traffic growth and audience and fans and that sort of thing. So that's kind of been a motivating factor that was because of being a musician and a performer. So do you think your background in business has maybe influenced that approach?
For sure. Yeah, definitely. And also just being around, I guess, my parents are business owners. My partner is into sales. I'm very much into the business world. So I understand a lot better business owners' needs. And also I've been into the fintech space for quite a while now. And I've been talking to fintech founders. I've got founders who are my friends. So I understand their pain points and their needs. And I understand that, having great content, sure, it looks pretty, but at the end of the day, it needs to also bring in results. And that's where I was like, okay, I'm going to try and be a lot more aligned with them, with this agency and this way of working.
And I mentioned in the intro, which I have not recorded yet, but I have mentioned that I'm speaking to myself in the future, that this process that we're going to talk about applies to not just fintech. Obviously that's the space you work in, but can this process apply to B2B, B2C? And then I'd love for you to talk about your 4 pillars of this process.
Yeah, of course, this framework definitely applies to all companies. In fact, Grow and Convert, the agency, they work with all industries, and we're kind of the ones who just focus on fintech because there's a few other benefits of using this for fintech. And there's also a few unique things about fintech that don't happen in other industries, such as regulation, compliance. You have to do a few things that this framework works quite well with. So your question is the framework. You want me to walk through that?
That'd be fantastic. So, okay. Yeah, you have a 4-pillar framework, right?
Sure.
For this? Yep.
Yeah. So first pillar is strategy based on pain point SEO. Essentially what this means is that we don't just do SEO, the typical way, which is, try and find a keyword with a high volume, create an article that targets that keyword, and then just hope that it brings in some conversions. Instead, we start with the conversion. We start with the customer. We try and understand their pain points. So it's usually 3 different buckets: pain points, use cases, and then there's some classic bottom of the funnel keywords. And how do we find those? Well, we sit down with the sales team, sit down with the product team, sit down with the CEO or the founder, if possible, even the customers. That'd be amazing. And we use that research. It usually takes about 2 weeks, in-depth calls, recording, asking really difficult questions to understand things like, who are your best customers? What are their pain points? Why do they use your product? What are the competitive advantages of your product? And I guess the main question is, what is the trigger that would make someone go to Google and look for a solution like yours? So that's called pain point SEO. And then our second pillar is that ranking on Google is just half the battle. You also need for them to kind of read the article, like it, and then potentially sign up. And that's also quite difficult. So what we do is we make sure that we don't, the content that we create is not just generic articles that have been regurgitated from other articles. It's genuine, like unique content based on interviews with the experts in the company. So a lot of the companies we work with are B2B. So it's more like technical, advanced content. And, you can't write something like types of payment methods. That's really beginner style. If you want to really impress your target audience, which is a CFO, a CTO, you want to write something a bit more advanced. Instead of relying on the writer's knowledge or the writer's research, a good solution is to instead interview the expert at our client's company. That could be a salesperson, a product person, whoever it is. That way we can create content that's a lot more advanced. We can also mention the product more often, go deep into the features. And that, of course, helps with conversions as well, because the reader is like, wow, they understand their stuff. Now I understand really well how this ties into the product, and I'm much more likely to reach out or to read more, whatever it is. So that's the second pillar. Third pillar is content distribution. As I'm sure many listeners know, when it comes to SEO, just publishing and waiting. I mean, sure, you can do that, but there's a few ways to speed the kind of waiting process up. So there's a few things we do. One is kind of influencer marketing, or basically finding external experts, we call them, who have a bit of an audience, and we reach out to them and we say, can we create a piece of content that's also advanced and technical? But then we encourage them to also share it with their audience. So that's one thing we do. Ads is another one, Facebook or Twitter. And then another one is maybe if they have a forum or like their own kind of Slack group or something, we might also use that as a distribution strategy. And we found that just by doing that and not just waiting around, it just speeds things up and just helps with the overall SEO process. And the last pillar is that we track everything. We try to be accountable for leads, which means that when we start working with a client, we'll figure out how valuable is one customer, how valuable is one lead, and then we can do calculations to figure out, okay, how many leads do we need to generate to kind of break even from our costs? And that's our first objective. And just having all those numbers, it does sound a bit crude, right? Because you're putting everything into numbers, but business owners, this is just what they want. They just want to be able to see the numbers and say, okay, it makes sense. And often, for example, if we do the numbers often before we even start working with the client, because if it's like we need to produce 150, 200 leads per month, it's like, it might not make sense, right, to do content at this stage. So we also use it as a way to kind of demonstrate if this makes sense for them or not. And we use analytics and Tag Manager and other tools to track basically the conversions that are coming from the content, and we can attribute them to the specific articles, and that helps with optimization and also just proving what we're doing. So yeah, there you go. Feel free to.
That's fantastic. So, and you just covered that was that was the entire process. So what I want to spend a little bit of time is unpacking some of those things, right? So, if you've been listening to this episode so far, I mean, certainly anybody could take that process and walk away and really understand and have a good strategy for how to approach this. But let's unpack that some more, because I think there's a lot of things that I'm curious about in some of the details of that. So I want to go back to the part where you're addressing pain point SEO. And what are some examples of pain point SEO keywords?
Great. Okay. So pain point SEO keywords. So for example, I'm just using examples from real clients, because then we can, this actually has worked. So for example, we have a client where they are an alternative to Amex. And one of the main problems with Amex is that it's very expensive. So one pain point keyword that we targeted was Amex no annual fee. That's a pain point. So that's just an example, just off the top of my head. What are some other pain points?
And you mean American Express, right? Just for some people that might not know the acronym. And when you're targeting like an alternative keyword, like I think it was MX no fees or something like that.
No annual fee,
Yeah, no annual fee. What I've tried to do this, in many cases, the actual brand is ranking at the top, or even in the top 2 or 3 or 4 positions. So do you have a method to identify like when you could possibly rank above the brand, or at least second or third, or right? Because that can be a little tricky to navigate depending upon how strong Google is interpreting that as like a brand or a navigational search.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it depends on the country. I don't know if we're on the first page for that keyword, but that's an example of one where, I don't know if we'll be able to get on the first page, but it's a hypothesis. When we start working with a client, like each article is a hypothesis, and let's see if this works. And we have gotten leads from that article. So obviously it is working. We're not on the first page, but
and I think one approach to your strategy is that a lot of this is not super high volume traffic necessarily, right? So, but you're looking at and measuring leads and then the business result. So, and that's me looking at it through that lens of like, hey, did we get 2,000 visits this month or whatever? But you're looking at it like, how many leads did that turn into? So even if you're ranking in the middle of page 1 and you're still getting some of that relevant traffic to acquire leads, that's still a win, it sounds like. And so some other like pain point keywords would be like versus keywords or alternatives.
So I mean, there are some classic, I'm just looking at the website, but there's some, we call them like classic bottom of the funnel keywords. So alternatives to, someone maybe is not very happy with PayPal, or whether it's like another solution, Wealthfront, and they're like alternatives to, that is clearly someone who knows what their problem is, already knows what the solution is, and they're literally comparing you to other solutions. If you're not ranking for that, you're literally leaving customers on the table. So it's like one of our first ones that we like to rank for. And alternatives specifically is really an interesting one. But anyway, comparison articles also, so comparing two different solutions. A few companies are often a little bit uncomfortable about this because like, we don't want to talk about competitors. But I always use like a big fintech company called Wise. Okay. And I always use them as an example because they do a lot of this, and I'm like, they're only going to do it if it brings in results. So we've seen a lot of good results also from just comparing. And there are ways to write these articles without dunking on competitors, without being too salesy. There is some nuance there, and we can get into it. It's all about really respecting the reader and the customer, putting yourself in their position and thinking, what is the information that they want? And you can talk about your product in a natural way without being salesy and annoying. There are ways to do that. So there's also some writing skill in there that we've honed over time. There's a few like best accounting software. That's another one. Pricing pages is a really big one. So a lot of people don't like talking about how much their product costs. Yeah. So you could talk about how much their product costs, and you could get that customer, which is a big one. And then
so you're saying, because that was a really good tactic. So other companies don't want to talk about their pricing, so you talk about it as their competitor. That's an interesting one.
Wise does this a lot. It's so funny. Okay. But Wise will do. So Wise is like I don't know if you've heard of them, TransferWise. They basically you can send money right with them. Yep. So they compete with big banks, and they have articles literally that are like how to close your bank account with big bank, how to open your bank account with big bank. Like that is obviously, who would you rather own the narrative, you or your competitor? Well, obviously you. Right. So it is very clever. It does take some guts from like our client to do that. We always educate them and say there is benefit to doing this, don't worry. But if they understand it, then there's a lot of benefits. And it's pretty cool. There's
a lot of clever, like in the B2C world, you can do like product name doesn't, or product name won't, like things that problems people are having with like consumer products. That would be something applicable in B2C. I'm really fascinated about your 2-week research process. So there was a period of time where I tried this a little bit with clients, right? But it's a lot of work, and it's a lot more work than just opening Google and using some tools and like researching keywords kind of like we all do without actually talking to anybody, right? But I'd love for you to break down this process and approach a little bit more. So who do you talk to kind of do this sort of research, and what sort of like questions are you asking to sort of arrive at these good topics and keywords?
Yeah, so this is a really key part of the process, because our main goal, and to be honest, like in 2 weeks, we're not going to understand thing, right? It's going to take more than that. But the 2 weeks is kind of the foundation, where we usually set up maybe calls with 3 to 4 people in the team. And it's usually the founder, if possible, sales team, product people, and pay perhaps a customer service person. So we're trying to talk to the people who are the most customer facing, or who understand the customer problems the most. Okay. And throughout those calls, our goal is to, first of all, understand, like, we might ask the CEO, and like, why did you set up this company? What is the reasoning behind this? What were the gaps in the market that you were trying to fill? Yep. And then we might ask the product person, what are the features that people use the most, that like the most? What are your competitive advantages compared to others? Okay. And then we'd ask the salespeople are the ones who really know the most, because they will be the ones who will say, who are our best customers, because we don't want to just create content for everyone. We want to create, and we don't even want to create content for all customers. We want to create content for the best customers, those who stay the longest, who, pay the most, who like you the most, who are the least work. So that's what we're trying to identify. And this is where really content overlaps a lot with products and business development. Someone who works in content is also, I think the skills overlap a lot with products. And I've read a few product books and I'm like, yeah, we use this a lot in content. Quite interesting. So basically our goal with these interviews is to really understand the product. So we'll do a product demo, is to understand who the customers are and why they use the product and what pain point specifically does the product match. And then, and understand the target customer. And also sometimes we'll ask like, what kind of content do you think would help you as a sales team? So sales enablement content is always useful.
Okay.
And just understanding all that, we can then go ahead and then do the keyword research. And then it's a lot easier to prioritize, because it's like, oh, wow, several people have said that this is a really key pain point. And it's like, okay, if it matches like a keyword, let's go do it. And even if it doesn't match a keyword, we'll sometimes do it, because this also works.
That's fantastic. I was just recently working with a client that here in the US that sells commercial real estate software, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I just had a brief conversation with somebody that was explaining that all of their target customers live in Excel. And this is something common I recommend to software companies all the time, where I'm like, you should create Excel templates and Google Docs templates and spreadsheets, because when you think about it, like your competitor in a sense is Excel and is the DIY solution for software companies. So they did one blog post, and in like a couple weeks, they got a ton of conversions off of like some Excel template for some like crazy accounting or whatever, like calculation sheet or something like that. So I'm curious, on the Growth Gorilla podcast that you were on that I listened to, that was really fabulous. So if anybody wants to check that out, I'll put a link in the show notes. But you mentioned some questions to ask company sales teams. So I'd love to know what some of those examples might be.
Okay.
Do you need to pull it up
on hand? I have like an article there is an article on our website, mintcopywritingstudios.com, where I go into detail, and I called it, what do we call it? How to do research for bottom of the funnel content. I think there we go. So let me bring up some of the questions. So who is it? Sales team you want to hear?
That'd be great. And I'll put a link to all these in the show notes as well.
Great. So some questions to ask the sales team. What was the last prospect that you had a really easy time closing? This is really like, there's good practice in customer research to always ask what has happened or what they've done rather than what they would do. So it's always good to hear like, what was the last prospect that this salesperson closed or talked to? What were they like? What was the challenge? How did you solve it? We might ask also like, what are the easiest people to close? Like the ones they have an easiest time closing. Maybe would ask also what people compare you to. So maybe, they could also compare you to a competitor, but they might compare you to Excel or to completely different industry. So that's also quite interesting. Maybe would ask also like, what is the most common reason people buy your product? And then we'd also ask, what are some other ways that the target customer solves for the problem? What happened last time? Pain points, use cases, biggest competitive advantage. And then we always like to ask real examples, like talk to us about a real customer. What happened? What was the problem? That kind of stuff. And also a lot of follow-up. Follow-up questions are the key, because that's when you get the real nuggets.
Yes.
Information. So always asking why, and never being scared of like, sounding stupid or whatever.
Yeah.
And just really digging into it. I know the interviews do get quite intense, but I think both parties after the interview are like, wow, that was really interesting. Like we got really deep. So I personally enjoy them a lot. I hope the salesperson on the other end does too. But so those kind of questions that we would.
And so how do you take all this information, whether it be notes or recordings you mentioned that you do, and how do you translate this all and convert it and bring it into like finding keywords or at least a topic? Do you have a process for that?
Yeah, this is where the real magic happens. And that's where I would say content and SEO becomes an art a little bit, because this is where usually, so all the interviews are recorded. And so it's a mix of reading the transcripts and re-listening to the interviews. And then just while you're listening to the interview, like just having Google open and being like, oh, really? Would they use this keyword? And then looking through the results, or opening up SEMrush and doing the same there. And then playing around with the search results, playing around with the keywords that the salesperson is talking about. And then obviously whenever you think of an idea, testing it out, and if you do that exercise with 3 to 4 interviews, you end up with a huge list. Yep. And to be honest, you don't even have to do that because you don't need a huge list. We only we do that exercise. I would say every 3 months or something. Okay. So it's not just, at the first 2 weeks we'll do it. And that's the strategy and that's the calendar and buy, because we're constantly learning. Like the first 3 or 4 articles are hypotheses and we're going to put them out and test. And then maybe in 2-3 months, we'll understand the product a lot better. We'll have some real results. So we'll be able to tell what's working, what isn't. And then maybe after 3 months, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to listen to these interviews again and see if I can catch anything else. And honestly, I've done that a few times. And it's crazy how you listen to an interview a second time or third time, and like, oh my God, how did I miss this last time? And it turns into an amazing article that brings in customers. So it's never ending content in an end. And I'm sure you agree with that, right? Optimization, it never ends. And also the more you understand a product, the more you work with a client, the more you write the content, you understand the best way to communicate their value props. So it's never ending.
My approach has always been, I'm very manual when I do research, right? Like I'm in Google, I'm using keywords everywhere as a plugin so I can see search volume right there. When I talk to somebody like J.R. Oaks, who was on the podcast in 2020, he's analyzing search intent automatically, right? He's writing scripts and all this stuff that's way over my head. It sounds like your process is also fairly manual. Do you use any tools or transcription software or anything that just sort of helps you kind of organize or make sense of everything that was talked about a little bit better? Or is it really do you favor that sort? Because if you favor that sort of manual approach, I'm definitely with you on that, right? But I'm just curious if there's any tools that sort of help you speed that process up.
Otter for transcribing and Excel.
What do you use for transcribing?
Otter.ai.
Oh, okay. Otter.ai. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think you can automate understanding a customer. How on earth are you going to automate that? I don't see how, because here what we're doing is listening to an interview and really putting yourself into the reader's shoes. So I'm not sure how you can automate that. Intent, I don't know. I mean, obviously intent is important, but at the end of the day, we don't care about just the searcher's intent. We care about our target market searcher intent.
Right.
So sure, a beginner could be searching up something, but are we targeting beginners? We're targeting maybe CFOs or CTOs. So I don't care if their intent is to learn what is a payment method. I'm not going to write about that because our target market is a lot more advanced. So it's a bit, you have to be a bit careful, and we don't nail it at the beginning, right? This is why the first few articles are hypotheses and we're testing.
I see.
So it's over time, you slowly gain an understanding, and it takes a while. And that's why we're always very transparent with clients, and we're always like, it's going to take a while. There's a lot of learning involved, but if they understand content and and content often plays a big part of their mission and their marketing, then it works.
So I want to talk a bit about actually writing and optimizing the content. So you've identified topics, you've talked to customers, you've gotten pain points, you've gotten some keywords, right? When it comes to actually creating the content, the first part I want to jump into, you have a really great article on introductions that convert. And I often very much think about writing a good introduction for SEO and ranking purposes. One thing I recommend to all my clients is being on topic in the intro, because you'll often get these posts that writers create, which they go off it's almost like you can write something and delete the first 2 paragraphs. And then by the third paragraph, you've got your good intro. Can you talk a little bit about what makes intros convert?
Okay, so the article does break it down a little bit. I mean, the key thing, first of all, we take about 2 weeks to produce an article. It's a lengthy process. There's 2 or 3 people involved. There's a lot of thinking, what does the reader want? Does it make sense? We talk to the expert. Each article is based on an interview with an expert, right? So we even ask the expert, what do you think the reader is looking for? So there's really a lot of thinking, and they're hard work, I'm not going to lie. And sometimes frustration enters because it's like, no, we're not sure if this works. So they're hard work. They're not just like 2-hour blog posts like that. So the introduction, what we found is that because we're writing bottom of the funnel often, not always, but often, these are people who are searching up alternatives to PayPal. They don't need like generic statistics.
What is PayPal?
Like PayPal was founded and right. blah, 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 blah. And, as a person, you need to move money. It's like, no,
no kidding.
And so with bottom of the funnel content, it just makes sense to get straight to the point. You could maybe, we haven't tested this, but you can maybe just have a CTA even at the intro and just
right
be like,
at the top.
Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people don't want to read the article. They just want to get their stuff done. And I've been on the other end of that as a searcher or as a reader, where I'm like, I don't want to read your content. I just want to take action. So you really want to try and make it as easy as possible to take action. So in terms of intros, what we do is we try to start the intro with like outlining the pain points, making it really clear, like trying to make it relatable. So they read it and they're like, you got me. Like, this is exactly the problem that I have.
Okay.
And I'm glad I'm in the right spot.
Yeah.
And this is, if you want, I can read one out to you.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So this one is basically for clients. They're a neobank, like a small banking solution. And we're targeting people who are comparing different business bank accounts. Mm-hmm. The keyword is business bank comparison, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's really simple. We started out with, when comparing business bank accounts, you'll likely come across a few issues. Banks don't always display their fees clearly on their website. It can take days and weeks to get set up with a bank account, which makes it hard to test them. You might not have the time to go inside a branch to get clear answers to your questions. It's like someone who's had those problems reads that and is like, that's exactly the problem that I have. I'm in the right place.
Yes.
And then we go on to add a call to action if they want to, check out the bank, the banking solution. And then it goes on to the rest of the article, which is a comparison of these business banking solutions. So it's really, we try and make them quite to the point, outlining pain points, and not too long.
So you had some interesting thoughts on whether companies should use a consistent tone of voice. And you talked about this also on Growth Gorilla. So, and I believe your stance is that companies should not really worry about that when it comes to this sort of content. So I'd love for you to explain that, because when I work with clients, most of them are concerned about tone of voice and having consistent brand and everything like that. So why not have a consistent tone of voice for companies?
I think people are confusing tone of voice with housekeeping. Housekeeping is like, okay, we use British English or US English. We do apostrophes like this. We do hyphens like this. To me, that's not tone of voice. This is housekeeping. This is just how we work. Mm-hmm. Tone of voice is like, your style. If you're funny or you add jokes here and there or you add memes, that's like a tone of voice.
Okay.
And I think in the podcast, what I was saying is that it's just very difficult to replicate. And usually what makes a tone of voice really good is a tone of voice is like an accent, right? And it's just really unique to that person. And if someone is famous for their tone of voice, it's probably because they're like an influencer already. And if an influencer is trying to outsource their content, it's like, it's just, you're going to lose what makes you unique and different. You're going to lose what made you an influencer. Mm-hmm. And also, we're writing for companies. Readers don't like, especially for bottom of the funnel, readers don't care about how you're writing the flowery content and all that stuff. They want to learn something. They want to get something done. Maybe there's an argument. I would say there's an argument for news articles, for bloggers. But once again, we're talking about companies, and companies, they have one goal, which is get customers, grow. And I wouldn't worry too much about tone of voice.
So
housekeeping. But
that's right. And is tone of voice in your mind different than like a style guide? So a lot of companies have these style. That's that style guide is more a housekeeping area. Okay, got it.
That's what it sounds like, right? What is a style guide to you?
I think that from what I've seen from style guides, like it might be certain conventions when it comes to how to should you use the Oxford comma, like stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a housekeeping for me. Style guide, I guess, just same words, different words, but
and that makes sense. So when you're creating content, what else you're putting in the process to think about optimizing for potential rankings for SEO? I know when I guide clients to create content, we're looking at like even just clear writing using like Hemingway app, for example,
Sure.
or thinking about topical completeness and stuff like that. So are there aspects or tools or process that you're putting into the content to optimize it for search?
So for search, well, this first thing was just to make sure we're targeting the right keywords. The second thing is to make sure we create a really good piece of content that is for a target market and that they genuinely they want to read, answers their questions, and is maybe unique, has some original insights based on an interview with an expert. So what else can we do? We also use ClearScope. It kind of helps a little bit with making sure that we're ranking a little bit. That's the more robot side of Google. We don't let it hinder the flow though. So, if it starts to not make sense, then we'd stop there. What else? Building authority of the website. So that could be backlinks. It could be, working with external experts, as I said before. And yeah, that's kind of the main things, backlinks. And I mean, if you're targeting the right keyword and you've got really good piece of content and you're building authority slowly, that's kind of the three key ingredients. I don't know, what else would you want to include in there?
Yeah, maybe I'm definitely obsessive when it comes to content. So I will look, and I think a lot of things you talk about maybe are just have a little different terminology than what I think about. So I think about like, am I targeting a beginner or intermediate or advanced level reader, for example? Sure. And I'll analyze Google and you'll see certain search results when you search a topic. Google's ranking beginner's guides. And you're like, okay, so if I'm writing this advanced guide to something, that's missing the audience and I'm not hitting the right intent there. So I look at like, should I use more noun-driven language or verb-driven language? Like if it's a how-to, right? Like I get super, and this probably because a lot of the content I help clients with falls very much in top of funnel, which takes a lot more variety of like, I'll be doing how-tos, or I'll be doing like just topical guides to something like, what is this topic? Or like list-based posts, like content marketing strategies or whatever it may be. So I'm always looking at, if it's a how-to, we need to be verb-driven and it needs to be active language. If it's a topic, more Wikipedia-like intent search, we need to sit back and be passive and state informational facts and things like that.
Yeah.
I'll look at things like sentiment as well. So one fun thing to play around with is Google's natural language tester, and it'll show you the sentiment analysis of content. So one of the stories I always tell is like years ago, I was helping a engagement ring website, and I was analyzing all their competitors, and the competitors that did well, like their positive sentiment was off the chart positive, because that is a product and content that should be really, really positive. But if you're writing medical content like that, it's probably not going to work, because nobody wants a doctor that's like way over the top optimistic or like super pessimistic and negative, right? You typically want, what happened to my camera? You typically want medical content that is more neutral, right? That should fix itself. For anybody, obviously everybody's listening, but for Araminta, I just went totally blurry. Sorry about that. Come back.
It's fine. I think, go on.
Go ahead.
No, I think what makes it, I think this is where the benefit of working in just one industry, fintech, is that we don't have to worry about all this different styles.
That's interesting.
And that it's just usually, I mean, it's not always the same customers, because sometimes we're targeting CFOs and CTOs, and sometimes we're targeting freelancers. So it is, it is different, but I would say the variety is a lot less, and it's nearly always B2B. So also it's usually quite similar, quite to the point. Right. And the other thing is what you've mentioned about intent. We do a lot of that, but that is kind of during like right before writing the article, and during our call with the expert, with the internal expert or external, I guess, to try and understand, because we what we do is just position ourselves in the shoes of our target customer. So sure, like as I said before, if it's a beginner, if the searcher is a beginner, then, and everything is beginner, but we're targeting someone who's advanced, then we're like, maybe this is just not the right keyword to target, because we want to be targeting someone who's advanced. So we do a lot of that thinking, a lot of back and forth. We have like a Trello and Slack, and we're like, so what do we think is the intent here? What do we put first? So there is a lot of thinking about it, but it's more like from the target market, from our target audience or target customers point of view, rather than just the searcher. Because at the end, we want to help our client get their target market, not just anyone on Google.
Right. So, and it's definitely a skill to be able to strike that balance as well. One thing I'm curious about is, I was looking at Money Dashboard, which I believe is one of the sites that you referenced some content examples from. And by the way, the content looked great. It's ranking great for like these really bottom funnel keywords like you've been talking about. But one thing I noticed on their blog in particular that I always really struggle with, there was no main menu. Not that I saw anyways, right? So, and that's something that anybody looking to drive conversions is a huge fan of, right? Like you eliminate choices, you eliminate other things they can click to get them clicking on your call to action, right? So, but I'm curious, and I just don't mean to single out that one example, but my question being, are there any particular blog design features or UX features that you try to encourage the sites that you work with to do that help drive conversions?
Yeah, for sure. So Money Dashboard, this is a long time ago when I was a freelancer. I didn't work with them we didn't work with them as an agency on their strategy. So I only did a couple of articles for them. And if you go on their website, you can see that most of it is top of funnel. So it's like just a little different.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of UX for the blog, so do you mean like the blog listing page or specifically blog posts?
Yeah, like on a blog article page, are there any particular design features or UX features that you see that perform?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Well, we are quite, I don't want to swear on the podcast.
You can.
We're quite detail oriented when it comes to, UX and what you've mentioned. So for example, we'd say font minimum 18. I quite like 20 pixels. Make sure there's many paragraph breaks. I would say every 3 or 4 lines.
For that font size, are you talking about desktop and mobile, or does that differ depending on the device?
I would say, so it is 18 is probably better on mobile.
Okay.
20 is maybe too big for mobile, but 20 works well on desktop. What else then? So paragraph breaks, black font. Like this might be really, obvious to content people, but in the fintech space or in the banking space, just you have no idea how many blogs you're like, I don't even want to read this.
Right.
It's so difficult to read.
It's like a blue font or something. Yeah.
Oh God. And then narrow paragraphs, so maximum 750 pixels. Mm-hmm. Try and make it as uncluttered as possible and put it in the middle, if possible, like centered. And call to actions that are easy to read. Also, I'd say hyperlinking that is a link, right? Rather than just a color. So these are just really small things, but
so do you mean underlined hyperlinks?
Underlined hyperlinks, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Like those are literally all of the same UX recommendations I'll make to clients as well. Mm-hmm. Narrow columns, like font you can read, like all that stuff's super important. And I think it adds to the linkability of the content as well. Yeah,
exactly. And it's just comfortable. It's like, how can you expect, because obviously our target market, the content that we're creating, people are actually going to read that because it's going to generate customers. So we want to try and make it as comfortable as possible. And I read a lot online, so I'm also on the other end of that. And it's just so much more comfortable and easy to read when the UX is right. And people also read a lot on their phone. So it's really important to make sure that the phone formatting also is good. So we actually do all this for our clients. We set it all up so it's really easy to navigate.
Oh, cool.
Because it's very important. If it's terrible formatting and hard to read, then they're not even going to bother reading the article, and we can't tell them about how amazing our product features are because they're not going to read it. So that is quite an important part. Usually the good thing is that it just takes up an hour or two to set it all up, make it look nice, and then you don't have to worry about it again.
What is your view on pop-ups?
Yeah, interesting. I used to be completely against them and hated them because I think we've all been on the other end of them. Mm-hmm. However, maybe the one pop-up that it depends. Are we talking about a homepage or in a blog post?
Let's start with blog post pop-ups.
So on a blog post, I think the only situation where I think a pop-up works is those pop-ups where you scroll, let's just say 75%, and then you have a really small pop-up that just pops up in the bottom right corner and just says, by the way, here's another article on this topic, or check out our newsletter, or maybe a call to action, like a product one. I'm not sure. Haven't really tested that. That's the one that I think is okay. I don't have any pop-ups on with studios on our website, although I am thinking that maybe I'm starting to think, because there is, obviously pop-ups do increase conversion rates, but I'm always like, I just hate them so much as a reader that I don't want to force others to deal with them either.
I agree.
But yeah, it's a small one. Maybe.
Do you find any particular areas to have like a call to action or something to drive leads or anything like that? Like on a blog post, like, do you like sidebars? Do you like them in the content? Like, are there any areas that you've seen that are more effective?
So definitely add one after the intro, either a button or just something that says, by the way, check this out. It doesn't have to be in your face or salesy. It can be like quite chill. And then obviously at the end of the article, and then within the article, like as you read it, sometimes it makes sense. It's quite natural to add a call to action. Maybe it's something like, it could even be a use case. So for example, oh yeah, this payment feature, it worked really well with one of our clients, and you can learn more about it by, checking out, reaching out to us, something like that. So there are ways to add call to actions within the text that are a little more subtle, easy to read, not really forced. So wherever it makes sense. And obviously when you're writing bottom of the funnel, that does come quite often. And even top of the funnel, we would add one right after the intro. We've seen good results doing that.
Okay.
So
I'd love to talk about the distribution piece of this. And because this is something that, again, honestly, a bit of a confessional here in this episode, but I focus most of my effort with clients on getting them to publish. And I do often take that approach with them where I'm like, let's publish, let it get indexed, and then we'll go back and make updates to content. But I do very little on the distribution side. I mean, a lot of my clients have ads they're running outside of SEO and what we're doing, or social media and things like that, obviously email lists. But I'd be first curious to hear what you're seeing working in terms of getting backlinks, or what that approach has been. Are you getting backlinks on this actual bottom of funnel content itself, or are you getting backlinks to elsewhere, like on the site? How does that process look?
Yeah, this is really the trickiest. This is tricky, right? Backlinks and building domain authority of the website is really hard. And we're learning like every month, and we're always, letting the customer know. So there's a few things that we've done, and we're still kind of experimenting. So I don't want to like say that we've, figured it out completely. So sometimes we would partner with another agency that kind of focuses on backlinks, and they do guest posts on other websites, and then they would backlink back. So we would kind of like work with them to do that.
How do you sorry to interrupt, but I like to go one layer deeper into the detail on the guest post thing. So how are you, it just comes with the territory, right? Most guest posts that I've seen are not the best of quality, right? So how are you just picking really high quality agency? Like, how are you sort of doing QA on that guest post content?
Exactly. And that's why we're not doing it too much. Because the quality of the guest post is like, I don't know who's reading this guest post. And it's just, so we, as I said, we're still experimenting. So we haven't done it a lot.
Okay.
And we just partner with this agency, and they do it. And they always send the guest post to me before sending it out. Or not the guest post, website they're going to publish it on. And it's mixed results. So that's why I would not really.
What would you look for that would indicate a high quality guest post?
Well, I mean, first of all, make sure the website is, legitimately people are reading that website. It's not just a random website, and a quality guest post is one that you feel that someone's actually going to read it, and it's actually got useful stuff in there, and it's educational or whatever. So I've done guest posts myself, and you'd always want to, if we're guest posting on a company website, then how does this relate to the company's product? Does it make sense to have a guest post about this topic? So
a lot of basics that unfortunately a lot of people that have been doing guest posting often just skip because they're just trying to get a backlink. So if you just use common sense.
It's just why I don't really like this method too much, because I don't know, like the quality is usually bad, and obviously doing guest posts ourselves is so much work. So we're not really in that position yet. So it's just one alternative, but we don't do it all the time.
Got it.
Another one would be working with these external experts. We've also experimented with partnerships. So basically, a blogger who kind of writes about similar topics, or we've also done it with a publication. It was kind of a publication. You could even, that's kind of PR, you could say, but it was more content. It was like, it wasn't PR. Yeah, it was more educational content. So we did this with a client where we worked with a kind of similar niche, a publication, and it was a guest post written by them, and they would talk about, and they would link back to our site. So that's one approach, although we're still experimenting with it. It's not the best either. Another one we've been experimenting with is Harrow, but it's one called Terkel. It's different. It's like Harrow alternative. Do you know what Harrow is?
I know. I've used Harrow, but what is this alternative?
Terkel. Okay. Terkel is like a B2B alternative. And it's just a little bit easier. I just want to make sure I'm like saying the right thing. Their website says it's like a Q&A. Like a lot of content. Yeah, a lot of content people use it when they want experts to answer their questions, and they just publish it.
Interesting. Okay.
And we've seen a few good results from that. Mixed results, because some of the publishers obviously are small websites, so it's like not really big backlink. But I've been experimenting with it, and it's not bad. So that's one option. And then the last thing I'll say is the benefit of working with startups is that they have funding announcements. So every 6 months, there'll be a funding announcement. And that's like, if they're big enough, then a lot of people are going to link to them and say, oh, that's amazing. And that's
great.
That's
and
a good
so you also do work with influencers to help it. Just to back up too, right? Like not all of the content you're doing gets visibility in Google, right? So you need to make sure the content's being seen in some way. If it's not going to rank in Google, there's no keyword search for it. So what does the work with influencers look like?
So the work with influencers, usually with influencers, we're also trying to rank for a keyword sometimes, not always, depends a little bit. Our main goal with the influencer is we look for someone who maybe has an audience that would overlap with our target market. We also look for someone who, has unique things to say, interesting things to say, and would appreciate us kind of talking about it and create an article on them. It's like a feature, basically. And we really do try and make it like it's personalized, and it's like all about them and their expertise. And then they'll share it. If it's a good piece of content, they'll share it with their audience. That doesn't really bring backlinks. It's more, audience promotion.
Authority and awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly, awareness. But yeah, we've seen also mixed results from that. It's a good way of building like a network, I would say, a good way of building contacts. And it's a good way of building unique, interesting content. But yeah, it's mixed.
And are there other ways so for the content that's not going to rank in search and get eyes on it that way, are there other ways that you have seen effective to get traffic and then conversions from that content?
Yeah, for sure. So sales enablement would be a big one. So basically pieces of content that help the sales team. And we've seen this quite a bit, actually. And I think there's not enough people create content for sales teams. If you read the book, They Ask You Answer. It's really, I don't know if you've read it.
Okay, I have not.
But it's a very, very good book where he just basically explains the power of content for your sales. Like every piece of content is like a salesperson, except that they're online 24/7 and they answer all your customers' questions. And so we do create content for the sales team. And for example, maybe a salesperson is answering some questions for a customer. Instead of repeating themselves, just be like, check out this article that will answer your question.
Right.
Another one that doesn't rank, but that brings in good results is founder style articles. So basically we interview the founder and we try and understand the why behind the company. This works quite well for companies where their target audience also want to kind of feel like they want to understand the company, and they feel like, or it works also quite well in a very competitive space where you need to, where features alone maybe won't get you there.
And how are you getting people to see the founder content?
Yeah, it's honestly, we're still figuring it out. We got some really good results with these founder articles, and I'm like, where are they coming from? I would say social media, because promoting these founder articles. And I would also say potentially either someone clicked in through the homepage and then went to the blog.
Internal visits. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, but I'm not sure yet, is ranking for the brand name. So with that article. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a good question. We're still trying to figure out where they're coming from.
So, and this goes back to like the hypothesis version of your process stage of your process, where like, the end content you want to create, you'll publish it, you'll see these results coming in, and then you almost have to reverse engineer it back into like, okay, how can we recreate that or like do that even more?
Sure. I mean, it depends a little bit. Like, you can't really repeat founder style articles, right? But it does, it might tell you a little bit about what people really want to read. It might tell you a bit about the types of keywords that are working really well. So it's just more information. Each article that we produce is more information that we can then use to dictate the next few articles that we're creating and the overall strategy. One thing that I'm very curious about, that I've wanted to get to in the interview, is talking about top of funnel traffic a little bit. And as I mentioned, I've worked with lots of sites that B2C, B2B, where we've driven so much top of funnel content, and like their search traffic has increased 20x, 30x, 40x over a number of years. Are there ways to think about trying to get that sort of content to convert, maybe indirectly, or like, how can we think about trying to get top of funnel maybe to perform better in terms of convert? Is that a lost cause? Is that something that is possible to do? Like, I'm just curious your thoughts around that. I think it's a wrong question, honestly, because it's all down to what is a target market researching. So in fintech, for example, there are a few, mostly B2C, cases where our target market really is doing a lot of top of the funnel research online.
Okay.
So if your target market is someone who is doing research. So for example, pensions. Pensions are complicated. So is tax. And a lot of people, before picking a pension provider, they're going to research online, and that stuff is going to be top of the funnel. Mm-hmm. So if your target audience does a lot of educational research or informative research, then yes, it makes sense to try and convert that into bottom of the funnel. And then you've got your typical funnel, and you try and figure out how to get them down, all that stuff. But I mean, if you're targeting B2B, really technical, advanced products, it makes, in my opinion, no sense to do top of the funnel content, because your CFO is not looking up stuff like what is a payment method. They're not looking this up. So it depends a lot on the target market. And if you know that they're doing top of the funnel research, then yes, it makes sense. And there are ways to convert them. You can add the CTAs, and you can just encourage them to keep reading other articles. But I think that's kind of a different topic. And we do see conversions from top of the funnel content, but that's because we know that our target market is doing that research. So it depends so much on your end customer. Like, what what are their habits online? And then that will dictate a bit what kind of content.
And I think the overall, and I like how you sort of repivoted the question to something, thinking about the customer and their pain points and what they're researching. I think another way that I could reframe that question myself too is just how to get more value out of lots of traffic coming to a website, right? And that value doesn't have to be a conversion. Maybe it's just brand awareness, or maybe it's email sign up, or maybe it's, something retargeting them or something like that. So if anybody listening, you can tweet me, and both of us actually. I'll put your Twitter, Araminta, in the show notes. I'm at Dan Shore, DAN_SHURE. Tweet me with ideas for how to convert top of funnel traffic better. If you're listening to this and you have some ideas around that, I'd love to hear that. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about analytics and measuring this, because I do know one thing that's tricky about this. It can be tricky to attribute conversions, right? So what's your process, and what are you looking at for actually measuring that these conversions are happening?
I mean, like, it's actually a little bit more simple and straightforward than I think people make it. We use Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager. And with those two tools, you can track pretty much anything you want on a website. So the first question to ask is, what is a conversion? What does that mean? In our case, it's probably a form submission or an app download, and maybe what else is there? That's pretty much app download, form submission, and maybe like a create an account kind of multi-step form thing. Mm-hmm. So you can set that up, and for those three things, you can set Google Analytics up to track that. In the app download situation, it is a bit different because you cannot track. You have to use a product management tool and use like a unique link to make sure that you're tracking the right articles. That's a bit of a pain, but you can set it up. If not, you can also track clicks, which we do as well. And then form submission, Google tracks that, Analytics tracks that automatically. Depends on the type of form and all that stuff, but we have enough knowledge on our side to be able to set things up. And if you use HubSpot, if our client uses HubSpot, then you've got all the information in there. So yeah, that's it. It's just, I think the main thing to do is to make sure you're actually prioritizing it and making sure you're tracking it. Because I think just a lot of people just don't track it. They're like,
right,
content is for brand awareness. It's not for driving customers. And I'm like, well, actually, you could track, and actually it's very valuable information because it tells you find really interesting information by doing that analysis. For example, that a lot of the articles that have low traffic bring in the most conversions.
Right.
That's really interesting. Or that the founder articles bring in the most conversions, and yet they're not even ranking. Or, all this information that you wouldn't get if you weren't tracking conversions. And it also tells you a bit about your target market. If you're getting a lot of conversions from the founder articles, then maybe that means that they care a lot about your story. Maybe that means you should write more about your story. Yeah. So it gives you just more information, and that's always good.
Are you looking at assisted conversions and first click conversions as well in analytics?
Yes. So on the Google Analytics, we use the model comparison tool, which is GA3, to be honest, still having to move to GA4. But if you go to the model comparison tool, you can check first and last click attribution. That's the two ones that we focus on. And we just take like a higher number of the two and then pick that one. We use linear just to see see how much credit each article gets, I guess, for a conversion. Usually first and last.
Use what is it called?
Linear.
Linear. What is
an average? It's an average of the two.
Oh, it's a method. I see. Yeah. Okay, not a numbers person.
Google Analytics does that.
They do that. Okay.
Oh yeah. And we keep it really simple, like just first and last click. That's enough information.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk a little bit about just like the content marketing operations and costs and things like that. I know in your other interview you mentioned the costs around content marketing. So I'd love to just talk a little bit about that, right? Like, what's the typical cost that a company should expect to spend on this level of content marketing? Let's start there with that.
Well, is this content marketing? Are we talking about, really early stage, still, doesn't have product market fit testing, or are we talking about content marketing like full on, let's get some customers, take it to another level?
Yeah, I think full on. And I think the context I'm asking this question, I still hear clients nowadays that are like wanting to spend $500 or $200 on an article. And, I had a client that had a fantastic writer. And then the writer quit, the freelance writer, the writer quit. And I'm like, I said to the owner, I was like, well, how much were you paying this writer? And they were like $200 per article. And I'm like, are you kidding? These are like $1,000 articles at least. I'm like, offer them some more money and then see what happens. And lo and behold, they offered them more money and the writer came back and all's good now. But so that's the context I'm asking, right? But let's talk about it, like everything, right? Like all bells and whistles. What's sort of the cost?
Honestly, I'm going to be that business person and say it all depends on the value that you're bringing. So if, for example, I can prove to a client, or if you can prove that your content is going to bring in $300K per year, then you could charge $50K, right? Or $100K and be like, that's a reasonable return on investment. So why shouldn't I charge that? So we like to think, in order to be really aligned with your goals, you want to try and work your way backwards and start with the technical word for this is value-based pricing. So basically, what is a value that we're bringing in terms of revenue or in terms of something else, maybe time, and how what does it make sense? How does it make sense to charge whatever it is whatever return on investment you want to offer them? Ideally, that is the best way to do it. However, in practice, it's not always as clear cut because it's often difficult to measure those things. Right. And also there is definitely kind of like a bottom, like a minimum, right, that you're going to have to charge. So we charge between £4,000 and £8,000 per month. And that is, I think, pretty normal for the content space. in terms of, we do have an article on our blog that breaks down why content marketing costs this way. But I mean, and I'm sure you already know this, writers are just one part of it, right? You need the strategy, and you also need the tracking, and you also need the calls with the experts. And I think content marketers these days, there was the Superpath salary survey. I can't remember what it was. Like the average salary was definitely like 80K or something, or 60K.
80K,
yeah, a full-time content person. Yep. So people think that, maybe hiring someone full-time is cheaper, and it's actually probably not, because, a content person is incredibly valuable, and they're also in shortage. There's not many. So I got, these are some numbers. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to know. It's just that, content marketing is, if you can prove that the content marketing is bringing a lot of value, and this is why we work the way we work, or we can prove that we're bringing in X amount of revenue, that's when it's a lot easier to get buy-in, and it's a lot easier to say, well, why wouldn't you pay X amount? That kind of stuff.
I think it's just good for people to still hear that it's not $200 for an article.
Oh God, no.
And I'll try to dig up that, you referenced a survey, I think, about the content marketing salaries. We'll try to dig that up and put that in the show notes. I'm also curious too, you have an article titled "Why We Believe Hiring Freelance Writers Doesn't Work for Most Companies." I tend to agree with that. I don't know if it's for the same reasons, but from your standpoint, why is it that you believe freelancers don't work for most companies?
Yeah. So I did reread it recently, and I think I need to change a few things because, first of all, also the title is not absolute. So it's most companies, not all.
Okay.
I think, so the reason why, and I explain it in the article, the reason is because it's what I mentioned before. Companies, at the end of the day, they're a for-profit entity. They need to make money. They need to acquire customers. And there's too much content out there that is like just top of the funnel. It's not actually bringing in customers. And even if it is, most people are not tracking it. So my argument in that article is just that working with freelance writers, it is not going to help you. They're not going to help you create content that brings in customers, because they probably don't know, they don't know a ton about your product, because, they're freelancers. It's not their job. They're writers, and they're not experts in your niche, which is because it's not their job. And also, those who are writers and experts usually command a much higher fee, of course, fair enough. Mm-hmm. And often this is not affordable for startups. And then the third thing is that writers are not strategists. Writers are not content marketers. So they might not know how to best present your product in order to get conversions. So that's basically my argument. It's just that freelance writers are great at writing. But if you're a company, you don't want just writing. You also want customers. And, an increase in traffic does not always equal an increase in conversion. So there's this kind of misalignment, and it's not meant to dunk on freelance writers. I used to be one. A lot of my friends are freelance writers. And I do think there is a use case, and this is where I might change the article a little bit. There is a use case where freelance writers might work, which is when you don't have product market fit yet, and you're still testing. Yeah. And we get a lot of people who come to us, and they're like really early stage, and maybe they have a very small website, and I'm like, look, an agency right now doesn't make sense for you. Instead, I recommend working with a freelance writer who will interview people in your team, so you can fix that expertise part. And it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot more cost-effective way of testing messaging, of creating maybe a little bit of content. And it's just good for testing. So that's kind of the use case where I would use freelance writers. But what do you think? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say that certainly for businesses, that makes sense. I think there's some types of websites outside of this entire conversation, like that monetize just traffic. Maybe there's a publisher, they sell ads, like freelancers could work great in that situation. But the biggest negative that I see when companies work with freelancers is like my approach to content and SEO is I always say like SEO content is how comedians work on their material, right? Like, so a comedian needs to perform their material in front of an audience to know if it gets a laugh and if it's working. And I'm a big fan of putting content in Google, seeing how it's ranking or not, and always making updates and adjustments to it. I always say when you hit publish, that's when you start working on the content. That's always been my approach. And certainly that applies like generally probably a lot more outside of fintech and the spaces you work in, especially consumer spaces. But the biggest negative I see because of that process is that when you work with a freelancer, they're not available necessarily to make updates to content, and they're not even necessarily have the bandwidth to like primary writers I work with love and hate me because I'm always giving them like, let's do another edit. Like, let's make these changes, add this section, update this stuff. Cause I want content to be like, as you say, really, really good and well optimized and great for the customer and the reader and etc. So I find an in-house writer, because they're not charging by article or by the word or whatever it may be, they can work on anything as long as they need to. And so that's what I always recommend companies, because then they have the flexibility to have that in-house writer improve existing content and update existing
and learn
content.
about the product. They will understand the product a lot better. They will understand the customer, like the target market, a lot better. Like if you can, in-house for sure. However, our experience, and it'd be interesting to hear your experience with this. So we've seen a lot of people who want in-house. The thing is that there's such a shortage, I would say, of content people or people who have that skill of optimization that most of them are freelance and don't actually want to go in-house. And also, if you do get in-house, you'll probably end up hiring someone quite junior, which means that then you need to train them up. And if you do not have, an expert who can train them up, then there's a problem there. And we've actually seen a few people ask us to help them hire someone in-house and then train that person. I find that really interesting. And I would say, of course, at the end of the day, if you can, as a company, hire a content marketing person in-house and a writer, that would be amazing. But, you might not have the resources. And as I said before, there's a big shortage. A lot of them don't want to go in-house.
Right.
And if they do go in-house, they're junior. So you've got that. Right. It's an interesting problem, but we're trying to help.
A lot of the work that I've done and do with clients is that training where they'll hire somebody junior in-house. I'll train them on often just writing and then SEO and all that kind of stuff. And then that gets them up to speed on everything.
That's awesome.
But the flip side of that too is that even somebody junior, they might at least be passionate and or experienced in that subject matter area. So that's a benefit, right? I mean, there's so many pros and cons to it. One thing I found fascinating was looking at your Twitter thread about how you don't use content briefs with writers. And I've always struggled with that too, because I tend to just sort of do something kind of custom that suits my own style. I don't know if I'd call it a content brief, or I've never really seen a whole lot of official content briefs, to be totally honest. I just try to create something that suits that specific client and that writer, that gets them from point A to point B, that gets them creating something that is optimized, etc. But what do you favor? So first of all, what do you not like about content briefs? And what do you favor instead of those?
I mean, I think we've all seen these content briefs that are like 5 pages long. There's so much information in there. The strategist or whoever wrote it probably put in a couple of hours, and the writer, it will take them a couple of hours to read it. And it's just, I've been on the other end of that, on both ends of that. And as a writer, you're just like, oh my God, where am I supposed to start with this? And then, so that's the main problem. It's just, it becomes a lot of work for both people. The second problem is alignment. It's just that, as a writer, I might want to, structure it this way, but maybe the strategist understands the product a lot better, or the target market a lot better, and they think a different structure is better. So alignment is a really big problem whenever you're working with multiple people for content. And then the third problem, I don't know. I just feel that they're too one-sided. There's not enough collaboration between the two. It's just like, here's a brief and then bye. See ya. Good luck.
Right. It's almost like the writer could have just spent as much time figuring out the brief, like the time it takes to figure out the brief, they could have just spent creating the brief.
So much work for both people.
So what do you favor instead of a content brief then? I think you mentioned something in that Twitter thread.
Yeah, so it's inspired by the How Grow and Convert do their method as well. And basically, what we do is we have a questionnaire, and first of all, most articles are based on an expert interview. So that makes things a lot easier, because then it's like, okay, just focus on what this expert is talking about. And then the second thing is a questionnaire, which is basically, there'll be questions in there. Things like, what are the feature benefits that we should highlight in this article? What are the pain points that we're focusing on for the reader? What else? Like how can we best communicate those?
So this is something that it almost like prompts the writer to know how to get started.
Exactly. So the writer, we're prompting the writer to put themselves in the position of the reader. And so it's kind of strategy skills in a way. And we often find that they much prefer that because, I've been a writer, I'm not sure if you have, but I much prefer writing content that I know people are going to read. So this exercise helps me as a writer understand what the person wants to read, what the person wants. We'll also add, like, one question will be, what can we do better than the current SERP results? So that's the first, and then the last question is an outline. So we found that the more in detail the outline, the easier it is to then create the article. So the first step is the questionnaire, and the strategist then will go over the questionnaire and add notes and thoughts and be like, what about putting this paragraph first or this section first? And that's where the discussion happens. And only once the strategist and the writer are aligned in that questionnaire does the work begin. And that's how we made sure that people are a lot more aligned, and it's helped. And we can also add Loom videos, people explaining. It's just a lot more collaborative. Yeah. And as I said, it takes a while. It takes around 2 weeks to produce an article, but that's how and it works. It works. Like, we've got results, we've got leads, we've got customers. So it's a lot of work, but the end result is that clients are happy and we've got customers coming in. So yeah, so far it works.
Yeah. One type of content that I like having clients create sometimes is FAQ pages. You can run Also Asked or SEO Minion, the plugin, and pull all the Google people also ask questions. And I think it's decent content. It tends to sometimes rank for the long tail. But the biggest reason I like that is because you're just handing the writer a list of questions to answer. And it's similar to that brief process where they're more like prompts, right? So I tend to, sometimes I'll have a client create an FAQ page about a certain topic. One reason being is because it's easy to create, because you can just pull the questions and then somebody just basically answers those. So I'd like to just chat a little bit as we start to wrap things up here. So you have a podcast of your own, and that was something are you still doing this podcast, or was that something you'd done a few years ago? And what's the name of it? What's it about? Just so in case anybody else listening might want to check that out.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been quite involved in the fintech community for a few years now. Because I'm also very passionate about fintech. So it's a good combination of the two. We started the podcast, I think, about a year and a bit ago, along with Annie, who's kind of a friend of mine. And we just saw that there's not many resources in the fintech and marketing space. So we started creating content, started a podcast. It was my second podcast. And it was great. We were interviewing really interesting people on fintech and marketing. We have put pause on it. It's called Market Like a Fintech. We have put pause on it at the moment just because we're prioritizing other things. In October, we set up a fintech marketing Slack group, which is, I think, a lot more useful to people because people can join and they can ask questions. And we've got so far over 600 people. We've got fintech companies from all around the world. We're doing virtual events every month. Along with office hours, when we start doing in real life events. So it is really a growing community, and it's very exciting. And we get a lot of people who, marketing can often be a black box, especially in the fintech industry. And so that Slack group is a place where people can ask questions and exchange ideas. And it's just, it's also just a fun for us. We really enjoy trying to make something useful for others. So the Slack community, we've got the podcast, we've got those virtual events, and hopefully going to be attending some conferences and hosting some in-person events. But it's just, it's a lot of fun.
And what was the name of that podcast again?
Market Like a Fintech.
Market Like a Fintech. Okay, great. We'll get all those in the show notes. And then speaking of speaking, how did you get into the speaking world in SEO? And would you have any advice for anyone looking to do more speaking?
Sure. So I am speaking at Brighton SEO in September, October. That's how you found me, I think.
Yep.
How did I get? Well, Brighton SEO, I went last year and it was really cool. And I thought it'd be really amazing if I could speak at it. So I just pitched them and they said yes. It was really quite straightforward.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, were there any ingredients to your pitch that you feel like might have caught their attention? Or I've pitched to conferences and they never get accepted. So that was way long ago,
No, honestly, Brighton SEO is a very unique conference in that they actively look for new people.
Okay.
And I have also pitched to many conferences and not a single one has gone back to me, except Brighton SEO. Okay. So there's a lesson in there somewhere. Yeah. But I think the key with conferences is to start small. So I think actually pitching doesn't work. You've got to start with one conference, and then with that conference, that speech, then you go on to another one and another one, another one. That's how you get to bigger conferences, because they're going to want to look at your previous experience. And I do a lot of webinars and virtual events, so maybe that helped.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing is just having an interesting angle. So my pitch was, how to produce content that drives leads, not traffic. I think that's interesting. So obviously they were like, hey, why not?
It caught my attention for the podcast. I think I did see on your LinkedIn that you left a recommendation for somebody that had maybe coached you or given you advice on speaking and that sort of thing. Is that? I have your LinkedIn right here. Let me see.
Who is it?
It was, I do a lot of snooping for this research. Katie Stoddard. And then you said Katie coached you for an hour and a half on gaining confidence in stage and speaking in public. Oh, a long time ago? Okay.
No, Toastmaster. It was Toastmasters. I used to go to Toastmasters. And
okay.
Do you know Toastmasters?
Yeah. They're like local speaking. Like
they're amazing. Yeah. I used to go in every country that I lived in. I would go, and I loved it. And I would still go, but now it's hybrid, and I'm not a fan. Like I would prefer doing it in person. Mm-hmm. But no, I would say, if you're trying to improve your public speaking skills, Toastmasters is definitely like such a good place to go. And Katie, I met her at Toastmasters, and she gave me like one session, and it was very useful.
Oh, excellent.
But it's been like 3 years, so I don't know if I've forgotten. Yeah. COVID obviously meant that we all our speaking skills got a bit rusty.
Right.
And I'm hoping to improve them again, which is why I'm going to all these conferences and speaking and all that. Yeah,
and I like the Toastmasters thing, because when you mentioned start small, like one of the places years ago I started was like my local Chamber of Commerce event and like stuff like that. And like they have a thing called, and I don't know if they have it where you are, but in the States, BNI, it's like a local business chapters where business owners get together and like kind of like exchange services and stuff like that. And you give a little presentation. So that was good practice too. So excellent. Where are some of the best places people can find you online?
Sure. So our website is mintcopywritingstudios.com. You can find me on Twitter at mintcstudios, on LinkedIn as well, Araminta Robertson. And you're welcome to join our Slack group if fintech marketing makes, if you're interested in that. And I'm just happy to chat. Always very happy to offer advice and thoughts. In a weird way, content strategy is my passion. So I am very happy to talk about it and to debate and anything. So if you've got any questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Excellent. Well, Araminta, if I've been pronouncing your name correctly, thanks for joining us in episode 123 of me restarting Experts in the Wire podcast. And we'll talk to everyone next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.